Welcome back to Black and Blue, the live discussion. And before we take more of your questions, we want to, those of you in our audience, to be more familiar with Dr. Joy and your work. Tell us about your history and your research. How does somebody that's living in Georgia end up being a marine biologist in charge of all of this?
Well, I grew up in North Carolina and South Carolina. I lived on the border in a little tiny town that didn't have a stoplight. I don't even think it had a stop sign, actually. Very small town, and on a farm. Grew up on a farm. And my parents instilled in me when I was pretty young a love of nature and being outdoors, and we went down to the coast in South Carolina. We spent a lot of time down on the water, and I just loved the water. And when I went off to graduate school, I was going to become a doctor, and I took an oceanography class my junior year and decided that it just felt right. So I told my mom a little bit later that I was going to become an oceanographer, and she looked at me and said, "What's that?" But she's incredibly supportive. Graduate school takes a long time, and I did my degree at UNC Chapel Hill and at the Marine Lab, and my first faculty position was at Texas A&M in College Station, Texas, which is also a bit of a haul from the ocean, but that's how I got involved in the Gulf of Mexico. So I've been working in the Gulf since about 1994. That was when I went on my first cruise there, and it's a system that I fell in love with the first time I went out on a ship there. And I really I've spent a lot of my career, focusing and working on the Gulf and just trying to understand the natural system and how it functions, because it's a really unique basin, and it's one that for some reason or another, there aren't a lot of people that do the kind of work that I do in the Gulf. So those of us who work down there have always been a pretty close group of people, and we all work together really well. We enjoy working with each other. We have really strong collaborations, and I think it's a great place to work and a wonderful place to work. And I don't think any of us ever imagined being in the situation we're in now, in terms of the time that we've focused our career on the system, and now we have to watch it just be so severely impacted by the soil spill. It drives in all of us a desire to do whatever we can to learn and grow and do something to contribute a positive outcome to this situation.
I understand that. And now, one of our callers or Ustream viewer wanted to ask, if a similar disaster happens in the future, what do you consider to be the essential first steps that our government should take?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who have a great deal of experience working in the Gulf region, and it is a bit of a different environment than I think, if any oceanographer with training can work in any part of the ocean, but the Gulf is a little strange because it does have a lot of these natural oil and gas seeps. So I think, putting together a team of experts with experience in the system and the region, with, targeting groups of people that have the expertise that can help you out. And I think that was done with the coastal response to the spill, to sort of get everybody up to speed and organized and have everybody doing the same sorts of measurements in the coastal marshes and bays. But that sort of a concerted, coordinated effort, for some reason or another, took a while to develop in the deep water, and that's where the spill had its initial impact, because it was so far offshore. It was the deep water oceanographic impacts that were the ones that really had to be evaluated from the beginning, and I think we missed a little bit of that opportunity. But the Pelican crews got out there a week after the spill started, and they collected data from all over the place at about 60 stations in the vicinity of the wellhead and up to 25 miles away. And so we have a lot of background samples that were right after the spill started, and then my cruise was about a month later, and then there are other cruises that are following up. So I think we're going to have a nice long-term data set in the end. I still think we need to have better coordination among the various people working out there, so that key measurements are being made on all the ships, and everybody's using the same protocols for the most part. But I think really that things like measuring gas concentrations, right, that's still not happening on all the ships, and I see that as a big problem.
And yet a lot of people are talking about the lag in government response time, but to be honest, didn't it seem like it took a while before anybody realized how bad this was?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I think there are two issues here. One is that people didn't realize how bad it was, because remember, initially the spill rate that was reported was first 1,000 barrels a day and then 5,000 barrels a day. And it was stuck on 5,000 barrels a day for a long time, even though independent scientists using three different methods said there's no way this is 5,000 barrels a day. This is at least 25,000 barrels a day or more. And it turns out that those independent scientists were correct. They were right on target. And part of the lag in the response was because the magnitude of the spill. If it had been reported initially that this spill was, 50,000 barrels a day, I guarantee you the reaction would have been different.
Yeah.
It's because there's this perception that it's 5,000 barrels a day. That's terrible, but how do you respond to 5,000 versus 50,000? I mean, 50,000 is a big number, and we don't even know if that's right yet.
Another question that's come in from one of our viewers, there's some mention of oyster beds. Will oil settle into the oyster beds, and if so, what is the effect and how long before they recover?
Oil will unfortunately settle into the oyster beds eventually, and oysters are filter feeding organisms, and they're not that selective, and it means that they may filter some of the oil into their bodies and incorporate it, and that's a problem. It's very, I think at this point it's hard to say how long the effect will last, because it really depends on how long the particular bed is impacted. So if you have an oyster living down here and you've got water that's oil contaminated on top of it, how much oil is dissolved in that water, and how long does that water stay above the oyster? If it's hours, the impact is going to be very different from if the water is on top of the bed for days to weeks.
We've got a question coming in from a caller who says they've heard of other methods from other countries. The question they're asking, are we using all of the resources that are available to us that we should be using?
Well, for example, I think there's a lot of international expertise in terms of dealing with oil spills and deep water spills. For example, Statoil in Norway, there are several people I know at Statoil who have been providing advice to BP and federal officials. I think the advice they get from such individuals is being heeded and listened to. It's just it's almost an issue of everybody wants to help, and they're getting. I heard a BP official say that they had 30,000 different oil experts from around the world that were providing them with advice and feedback. And when you've got that much advice and feedback, it's probably hard to filter through it all and sort of rank it and make use of it. So I think there are a lot of resources being put towards solving this problem. It's just a very complicated problem, and I don't even think I realized how complicated a problem it was until I was out there. And then when you see it with your own eyes, you realize what a big beast this is. It's a huge, huge area that we're talking about, and this is just it's a monster of a spill, and it's taken a while to tame it, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're going to take a break right now. We want you not to forget that we're taking your calls and your email questions. Here I am over here and over here. You can call us at 706-542-1331, email to news@WNEGTV.com. Again, we're taking your questions from our chat viewers also. Stay with us. We'll be right back.